so much for coming. And there's Billie Pierre.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having me on your territory. And and thanks for everyone attending today. My name is Billie Pierre. I'm from the Nlaka'pamux Nation. It stretches roughly from outskirts of Hope, BC to Kamloops, BC. And the pipeline was built in 1952. So that crosses about 200 of our 200 kilometers of our territory, the Nlaka'pamux territory. Our territory is unceded. Is anyone in this room familiar with the term unceded? Okay, cool. That one started becoming more popular after 1995. So in 1995, has anyone heard of Gustafson? The Gustafson struggle, 1995? That's where people started learning about unceded territories. After Oka in 1990, which was another armed standoff out in Quebec, yeah, Kanesatake and Ganawage, the Mohawk people fought to protect their ancestors from a golf course and like a golf course expansion. So at that time, during that struggle, the BC Treaty process was revived, and a lot of the First Nations entered the treaty process. And in 1995, Gustafson happened, and people started hearing about unceded territories, and that's where people, started waking up to this fact that the treaty process was there because our territories are legally ours. So 100% of my traditional territory legally belongs to my people. Over Canadian law, over the Queen, over BC municipal, any laws, that's the territory there. And it's collectively owned. It's not something I can just go and try to sell on my own. So I just want to kind of acknowledge that. And Gustafson took place on Secwepemc territory. And the Secwepemc people actually have a long history of resistance. And a very active in the recent years also. And I do want to acknowledge that they're my people's traditional allies. There's the Satlium, the Okanagan, the Secwepemc, and the Nlaka'pamux. We all work together. We're the interior Salish nations, and our languages are really similar. Our everything, our songs, our ceremonies are very, very similar. And I've spent, I'm 41 years old, and I spent like almost 20 years with Satlium and Secwepemc communities, and any communities that were resisting unwanted development projects, and just learning about, what we call sovereignty, learning how to be unceded, and, decolonizing myself in that political, in my political mind. So I'm really thankful for both, all the people from those nations that, had me there, and, I learned a lot about my own people's traditional ways through these neighbors, and what I've learned in the past few years is my people have actually stopped a lot of unwanted projects also, and have been very successful. The most recent, I'd say, is biosolids. Has anyone heard of biosolids? Biosolids is human waste. It's sewage, and it's being marketed as soil. And it's mixed with, Annis Island is near here somewhere. Yeah, it's mixed with all the chemicals from Annis Islands mixed with this sewage, and then it's made into a topsoil, and they wanted to spray it all over the Nicola Valley, so it's the Merritt area, and all the bands actually kicked that out. They blocked the roads within the past 5 years and kept them out and turned those trucks around, and it's the only place in BC that's done this. There's other communities that are fighting it, but biosolids is a really big issue, and a lot of the sewage comes from here, it comes from the Okanagan, comes from bigger cities, but my nation has fought and won a lot of the struggles to protect the land. The Coquihalla Pass Resort, during probably 2010, they shut that project down and protected our territories in the Coquihalla Mountains, so where the old toll booth was, along the Coquihalla Highway. They went to build a resort there, and that was shut down. The Stein, anyone hear about the Stein anti-logging struggles? So that was settling in Nlaka'pamux territory. That was stopped in the 80s. So these are, this is the people that, I come from. These are people, I'm thankful to, be tied with on that physical and spiritual level. So I'm going to go into my talk now. And, okay, so I'm literally just going to read this straight out. So the Indian Act is an illegal act that was created in 1876, and it made Native Nations a ward of the Canadian government. Our ceremonies were criminalized, we weren't allowed off reserves. Forcible child apprehension began, first with residential schools, and this is now morphed into child apprehension by social services. Indian Act banned and tribal councils were created and eventually became vehicles to assimilate Native communities into a capitalist system. Because people who see and who have always seen themselves as physically and spiritually connected to Mother Earth and a part of an ecosystem get in the way of profits. People who utilize their whole territory block profits, and people who manage reserve lands create economic certainty. Status Indians were created, and they are the people that the government recognizes as Native, thus lowering the numbers of Indigenous people that the Canadian government recognizes. In the early 1980s, Canada updated the Canadian Constitution, which upholds Aboriginal title. The Canadian Constitution was forced to acknowledge our rights over our traditional territories and our rights to govern ourselves. The government attempted to leave this out of the Constitution, and Native people ensured that Section 35 was included in the Constitution and that our Aboriginal title has continued to be upheld. The Nlaka'pamux Nation was recognized at this time by the federal government as a sovereign nation. So other than the Tsilhqot'in, no other nation in BC, or we're like the only nation other than the Tsilhqot'in that have no bands or First Nations involved in the treaty process. So the Nlaka'pamux territory is 100% unceded. To this day, it's like legally recognized in that way. So I want to talk a little bit about the the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project. When Kinder Morgan met with the Indian bands, it wasn't the only consultation that we were invited to have an opinion on was if this pipeline went through our reserves or not. If it went around our reserves, then if a rupture took place and polluted our reserves, they wouldn't have any responsibility to clean up a spill. Whether the pipeline could be built on our traditional territories wasn't taken into consideration. So our sovereign rights to our land was not upheld. And honestly, it really isn't ever. So I just want to acknowledge that. The Trans Mountain Pipeline goes through 4 reserves in the Nicoll Valley and crosses our traditional territory from roughly Kamloops to Hope. The reserves that it goes through, the Nlaka'pamux reserves, is 2 Godey reserves. So they're both Godey 1 and 2, Joyeska and Coldwater Reserve. The pipeline threatens our safety, it threatens our water and hunting ground, and it violates our sovereign rights to govern our territory. The southern interior faces the dangers of forest fires, which pose a serious risk if one takes place around the pipeline. And in the past 2 years, Merritt has had severe flooding. So I want to say that the pipeline goes directly through Coldwater Reserve, and that's why the band opposed the pipeline expansion. Or no, the band opposed the pipeline expansion because the proposed path for the new pipeline would be directly over their aquifer. And actually, the Trans Mountain Pipeline was found to have been leaking. In 2013, there was a leak that was discovered, but it's recently been discovered that that leak has been taking place for about 40 years. So it's never, this is on reserve. So this is like the kind of this is how the pipeline impacts us. And this is on one place along the pipeline path. And you can imagine all the communities, wherever this goes, are facing this problem. So I also want to say that last year in 2017, on Godi, which is located west of the Nickel Lake, during the floods, the ground around the pipeline washed away, leaving the pipeline exposed and suspended in the air, vulnerable to collapsing or leaking. And this was located uphill from on reserve, uphill from a house. And the family that lived there wasn't notified that this was a problem, that they were under risk of this pipeline rupturing. And they had been put on evacuation notice. They thought it just had to do with the flood, but it was the pipeline. And they weren't notified until 24 hours before the evacuation notice was lifted. So that's kind of the history. That's been our experience with this pipeline. It is a threat. So I just want to say that. And I want to talk about the worker camp. There's a proposed, in August 30th, 2017, Merritt Herald published that it's been approved that there'll be a worker camp in the Merritt area, and it's expected to accommodate 350 workers, but that there'll be more workers that will be looking for accommodations in hotels, RV, rental units, whatever. And I just want to say that it's becoming more and more documented that these industrial camps, or what they're called man camps, potentially impact everyone's safety in the communities. I'd say especially vulnerable people, Indigenous women and children are at threat. There's a group called the Nlaka'pamux Nation, and another, I can't pronounce their First Nation, but near there. They worked with Firelight Group and published in February 2017 a paper on they have there's a high concentration of industrial camps in this region, so that's up in northern BC. And though they support the development in the area, they want to create emergency response preparedness plans for the nearby communities because they anticipate possible sexual assaults and disappearances of members. They've already had negative experiences with the Nlaka'pamux industrial camp, where 6 known sexual assaults took place that were unreported. So I guess they're looking to expand it to having another man camp in that area. But I want to talk about also this past summer, a Native woman was found along the Coquihalla Highway. So the body of a young Native woman from Hay River First Nations Northwest Territory named Brittany Martle was found by a rest stop along the Coquihalla Highway in August. And the RCMP, the Merritt RCMP, pretty much right away stated that her death didn't appear suspicious. And I want to say that there's Native women especially from the nearby area, including myself and my aunt, that went to where she was found. There was like a vigil place set up, and it looks completely suspicious, just the location of where she was found. And I myself saw, I think we went there about 2 weeks after it was reported, her body had been reported, found there, and there was what I would say is evidence left behind, and I took a few pictures, but literally, I didn't want to touch them because I thought it was like a possible murder scene. And when we left, I realized that the Merritt RCMP had already said that it looked unsuspicious. So, I think because this woman's from the Northwest Territories, they didn't bother investigating her case. Her family wasn't right there in their face pressuring, for her murder to be investigated. And, I do want to acknowledge that the people in the Merritt area and the Nlaka'pamux women and people, we do support that family. We do support, her murder being investigated. And we did have a vigil for her in that area. And I want to say that it brings up great concern that, if the RCMP is going to behave in that manner over such a big, case like that, how will they handle having, this influx of strangers in the Merritt area? and it is really scary. Like, it's already, Merritt, you know, has issues of racism already. You know, there is definitely racism felt, there's classism felt. I'd say there's already people in the community that are vulnerable, you know, and at risk. And I just think that, you know, having a worker camp there would make it worse. So I want to say a little bit of the work that I've been involved in. We are fundraising to build along the pipeline path, and we want to protect our territory. We want to protect the water. After a bit, I'll show some slides or like some pictures of different areas of my territory. But I guess this past summer, I've been recording pipeline trucks driving along highways, taking pictures of evidence of soil testing, and contractors and their vehicles along this expansion route. And I want to say also that before the Federal Court of Appeals overturned the Trans Mountain Pipeline, you know, project's approval on August 30th, that there were 200 Canadian military stationed in Merritt. So they were there for fighting forest fires, and they were assisting, but I honestly believe that Merritt's pretty key along the pipeline route. It's between Hope, it's between, you know, like there's a Swatman territory heading east, and I really honestly believe that the military was there, that the federal government probably was going to declare a state of emergency and have the military guard, you know, the pipeline being built, because it was due to, they're planning to start to expand in September. So I think that's why the military was there. So, so we have like, so yeah, I want to acknowledge that. And there is a lot of, I don't have it on me, like, but off the top of my head, since 2013, there's been more and more money being poured into monitoring and surveilling, I guess, Native resistance. You know, there's been money pouring into protecting, like, the tar sands and the whole terrorism. You know, like, what's recognized as terrorism includes protecting the Canadian economy. So even fighting an unwanted project like a pipeline could be seen as an act of terrorism. So there's a lot of targeting of Native people by the Terrorist Act, and, you know, not just by the RCMP, by the military, by the police, by CSIS. There's so much, it's insane. And like, we're, you know, I just want to acknowledge that. And I want to say that, so I've been posting a lot of pictures, you know, about, I guess, monitoring what's going on the highways, what's driving by. And I'm not, you know, I'm not there every day, but every time I go out on the highway, or every time I'm near the highway, you know, there's a truck going by carrying pipelines, you know, or mystery trucks with covered tarps. And so I posted a lot of it on Facebook, and I want to say, I guess, people from my area noticed. So there's people from my area helping, and there was someone who's not involved at all, but on September 30th contacted me and told me that they drove 1 hour from Merritt to Kamloops and saw 44 trucks carrying pipelines and loads of loads covered in black tarps that were heading towards Kamloops. So this was kind of cool, like, this monitoring, because this was the day before I guess it was the Coastal GasLink LNG line was approved. So that's actually up north. So we believe that those trucks weren't for the Kingdom work, like the Trans Mountain Pipeline, that these loads were actually heading up north, and we're able to give notice to people fighting that LNG pipeline up there. So anyway, I guess that's pretty much what I have to share today.
Can we go online and